If you've been to our other webinars, today is going to be a little bit different. We are going to have 3 different programs talking today about a lot of different fellowship and non-fellowship and other engagement opportunities in the realm of science policy and or communication. So thank you very much for attending. We're going to have about 25 or so minutes for each program, and then at the end, maybe 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So if you do have a question for a specific program or director or person, please share it in the Q&A panel. We will keep track of those and answer those questions at the end if they're non-typable answers. And with that, we will go ahead and start with our Texas Sea Grant Office. And if Mia, you want to take it away?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Mia Zwolinski, and I'm with Texas Sea Grant. I'm the research coordinator at Texas Sea Grant. I manage the research competitions that our prime sponsor, NOAA, sends our way for different funding opportunities, national fellowship funding opportunities. And what we do at Texas Sea Grant, we are funded by NOAA, and the majority of our work is funding research to investigators across the state of Texas, and then assisting with the integration of the results of the research work with education, outreach, and extension across our coastal communities. And as the research coordinator, I manage those research competitions, which also include student competitions. So I have, I think I'm sharing my screen. Yes, I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
We can see your screen.
Okay. The green outline disappeared, so it kind of made me a little bit worried. So one of the 3 national fellowship competitions that I'll be talking about, the first one is the John A. Canals Marine Policy Fellowship, which is a 1-year fellowship opportunity for graduate students to move to Washington, D.C., hence the beautiful picture here of Washington, D.C., where fellows who have really a variety of different discipline studies, but are interested in marine science and policy. You don't have to actually have policy course history, but having that interest in the Marine Policy Fellowship sort of work is what will drive those applicants who are interested in pursuing the John A. Canals Marine Policy Fellowship. It's a 1-year fellowship that will be accepting applications next February, February, let me look here at the date, 17th. Our web page hasn't been updated yet, but I've sent out, and we will be sending out after the webinar, all of the documents that are related to the 3 different fellowship competition programs that I'll be talking about. So this first one is the John A. Canals Marine Policy Fellowship. And so what I have here on our webpage at texasseagrant.org under funding is the introduction of the John A. Canals Marine Policy Fellowship Program. It was established by Congress in 1979 and was named after one of the National Sea Grant Program's founders, a former NOAA administrator, Dr. John A. Canals. So many of you all know about land grant institutions, and so in the 60s, all the researchers were wondering about, well, what about water and sea and the importance of research derived from that? And in 1966, Congress passed the National Sea Grant College Program Act, and there are now 34 state sea grant programs across the country, including Hawaii and Guam. And the headquarters for the state of Texas's Sea Grant program is here at Texas A&M University. So all of these 3 fellowship programs that I'll be talking about, the John A. Canals Fellowship Program, NOAA's Office of Coastal Management Fellowship Program, and another program that's a joint fellowship program with the National Marine Fisheries Sciences Office, all of these applications would be submitted to the state Sea Grant program, to which at the university that the student is currently enrolled as a graduate student. And so these competitions will be occurring in January and February of 23, so they're coming up pretty quickly. The John A. Canals Fellowship Program is just really neat. The fellowship offers a unique educational experience to graduate and professional students who have an interest in ocean, coastal, Great Lake resources and the policy decisions affecting those resources. It's a 1-year paid fellowship, a 12-month fellowship, and then there's a 13th month to allow for the student to transition back home from the Washington, D.C. area. And so the applicants who are enrolled in a graduate program at an institution within the state of Texas would submit their proposals to Texas Sea Grant. And it's also allowed if there are students outside of Texas or who attend a university that does not have a state Sea Grant program, they may reach out to the NOAA office to get permission to send their application to the state Sea Grant program, to the state that has a Sea Grant program. So, for example, we've had applicants from the University of Oklahoma who gained permission to submit through the Texas Sea Grant program office here at A&M. And so that's just a really neat thing where you don't have to actually be attending university in Texas. It could be someone, a state nearby Texas as well. And so the eligibility requirements is that for the student to be enrolled in that graduate program at any point between the fall semester that we're in right now up until the date of the application due date. And as a reminder, our webpage, we haven't had an opportunity to update our webpage yet since the funding opportunity was just released right after or right before Thanksgiving. I can't remember which now, but the actual due date is February 17th of 23 to the state Sea Grant program. And so any students that are interested in that, they can check back to our texasseagrant.org funding webpage for students. When you click on the main, for example, I'll just quickly show you our main Texas Sea Grant webpage under menu funding for students, and then you can go to the different pages that you might be interested in. So the page we were just on for the John A. Canals Marine Policy Fellowship is at that link. The NOAA Office of Coastal Management Fellowship that I'll talk about next will be at that link. And then the third program, the Sea Grant Joint Fellowship with the National Marine Fisheries Services, that link is there. So stepping back to this webpage, I just love that picture. Gives you an idea. You would be have an opportunity to, once your application is submitted to the state Sea Grant program in February, we will conduct a state review during March, and this webpage takes you through different resources to look at. There are different student guides that the National Fellowship Program Office has provided to us for each of the applicants to review, that has just wonderful, helpful steps, step-by-step, exactly what the content of your application should be, what the review criteria is under the federal funding opportunity document. To me, that's the answers to your test. So when an applicant, whether it's for this fellowship application competition or the other two, look at the review criteria that the funding opportunity has, usually at the last section of the funding opportunity document, where the reviewers on both the state and national level would be reviewing your application. And so as you're putting your materials together for the contents of your application, look at the review criteria and see if you're answering those questions in your application, in your CV, in your how you've packaged your other elements that are required in your application content. We have different videos. We hosted a webinar last January that gives great tips on how to put together a competitive application. Although the actual funding opportunity each year and the guideline, student guide for filling out the application will change. Those documents will change. The basic elements and requirements are the same. So looking at even this webinar that we conducted on how to develop a competitive application will be very useful for anyone to review when they're in the process of starting to put together their application. We had, well, gosh, our host, Tacey Hicks, is a finalist. And so what occurs once you submit your application in February, and the state conducts its review in March, then the director will meet with the applicants if you've gotten to the point where you've passed the initial stages of a state review, and the Texas Sea Grant director will have a more likely a Zoom or a phone interview meeting so that the director can write a good support letter to be included in your application. And then our sponsored programs office then sends the applications to the national office where they're reviewed by NOAA. But our host, Tacey Hicks, is a finalist for this next year's fellowship that will be beginning in February 1 of 23. So that's pretty exciting. This video here was from a prior canals fellow who had then moved on successfully in his career into different administrative positions within NOAA. So the canals fellowship opportunity is a wonderful opportunity. The guidelines here on this webpage step you through how to submit an application, what elements are required and in what specific order, and suggested information in here, as including also the requirements per the guidelines. Here's the evaluation criteria step that we're always saying, please, look at these guidelines because those are the answers to your test, basically. And then I give a timeline of once the application is submitted and once the national office might select a finalist, then those finalists have an option to, in that next fall, have an onboarding, or excuse me, not an onboarding, a placement week interview process with many different national host offices in Washington, D.C. Canals Fellows could work for a host office at NOAA. It could be other federal offices like the National Science Foundation. We have our first ever legislative fellow this year who is working for the Senate, the senator from Hawaii. So that's reviewing congressional bills, so related to marine sciences and whatnot. So it's just, again, it's just a wonderful opportunity. And then listing further stipends and expenses, that sort of thing. So that's the information related to the John A. Canals Fellowship. I'm going to take a sip of water because I tend to start coughing. Let's see if I can abate. Keep your fingers crossed. So going to funding for students, the NOAA Coastal Management. So this webpage has the opportunity related to the Coastal Management Fellowship Program. The same sort of thing, but this fellowship application is due in January. This is for postgraduate students, so there's a range of time that's longer. So eligibility, and we don't have these dates updated quite yet. But eligibility would be for any student completing a master's, doctoral, or professional degree in natural resource management or environmental related studies. Again, it can be broad range of studies. Anytime between, and this would be August of 21, so going all the way back to a year ago through July of next year, 23. And of course, check the funding opportunity guidelines to make sure I'm not stating that wrong, but it's a broader range of when you could be completing your degree on this particular fellowship. But the Coastal Management Fellowship matches postgrads with a state, so anywhere in the United States, who has a coastal resource project that has been selected by the NOAA Office of Coastal Management to be a project to be worked on by that fellow. And so once applications are submitted in January, we then review those applications. Again, the director of Texas Sea Grant will make an appointment to meet with you via phone or a Zoom interview to be able to write a good director letter of support to be included in your application. We package the application and we send that off to the National Office of Coastal Management, and they conduct their review and conduct the states whose projects have been approved to host a fellow. They'll have a matching workshop in the springtime, and then usually by the end of spring, the applicants are made aware of which will be fellows for that project that will start the next August. So for this fellowship, it will actually start next August of 23, and it's a 2-year project. The Canals Fellowship is a 1-year fellowship, and those applications that come in next February of 23 will be for the fellowship award year, fiscal year 24. Kind of give you a little more of a perspective there. There's also another type of fellowship that is not available during for this next program. So for NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship, it will be just this first one that they're having applications to be received. And again, I've provided the funding document and all the guidelines required for this competition, and we'll make that available for any interested applicants after the webinar. And then again, it's steps on how to apply. And then lastly, I love this picture. So lastly, for the funding for students, the last fellowship program that I'll be talking about is the National Marine Fisheries Service and Sea Grant Joint Fellowship Program. This one is a little more intense. It is an opportunity where the student will be able to work with a mentor that they would select, and that would be part of them putting together an application between now and the end of January of 23. But those who are interested in maybe applying to the National Marine Fisheries Services Sea Grant Joint Fellowship Program, there are 2 different concentrations. There's one that's either a subject area of population and ecosystem dynamics or concentration in marine resource economics. It seems like we get more of this first one, but it's for PhDs, graduate students who are interested in careers related to the marine ecosystem and population dynamics, with a focus on modeling and managing the systems of living marine resources. The fellowship will be a 3-year project, and they will actually work on a proposal that they've proposed along with their faculty advisor and along with the mentor at the National Marine Fisheries Services Office, to develop the subject area of quantitative methods for assessing marine ecosystems, assessing status of fish, invertebrate, other targeted species and stocks, and assessing the status of marine mammals, seabirds, other protected species. And as I've mentioned, that they will work under the guidance of that National Marine Fisheries Services mentor at those office locations. The marine resource economics is for those related to more of a quantitative method, determining quantitative methods for assessing the economics of the conservation and management of living marine resources. And again, that one's also for up to 3 years. So we have the same sort of resources here. Before applying, read the funding opportunity. They also had a very helpful student guide that steps you through the review criteria and each element of your proposal. And we will be updating our website soon that will have instructions on how to make those applications come into the Texas Sea Grant program office. But those are the 3 national fellowship programs that competitions that are coming up in January and February that I wanted to talk to you about. And if you have any questions, you can ask now, or also email me at the contact information that you'll find on our webpage. My first initial, last name at tmu.edu, and also reaching out to Tacey Hicks. So I'm going to stop my screen share at this point.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Right on schedule. It was fantastic. Thank you, everybody. And I am also willing to answer questions if people do have questions about the Canals Fellowship as well, since I am now familiar with that. Next, we will be moving on to the National Academies of Science Gulf Research Program, and they're going to give us a little overview of their Science Policy Fellowship as well. Very applicable since everybody here is from the state of Texas, most likely. And they're going to give us both an overview of the program as well as a current or a past fellow that is going to join in and potentially give some thoughts about his experience. And without that, Maeesha, if you'd like to go ahead and start.
Great, thank you so much, Tessie. Let me share my screen real quick. Everything looking good?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Awesome. I'm really excited to be here to share our Science Policy Fellowship opportunity with you. And Tacey, thank you so much for inviting us to share this opportunity. So just to start off, my name is Maeesha Saeed. I'm a program officer with the National Academy of Sciences Gulf Research Program, particularly with the Board on Gulf Education and Engagement, and our fellowship programs fall under that particular board. So just to start off, I wanted to give a little bit about the Gulf Research Program. So the Gulf Research Program was actually created as a result of the criminal settlement after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon explosion. So the settlement asked for the National Academy of Sciences to create an independent science-based program targeted to reduce risk from offshore oil spills and to enable the communities of the Gulf to better anticipate, mitigate, and recover from future disasters. So as you can see, we have included our vision as well as mission in this slide. And our fellowship programs were created in a way to build capacity in the Gulf region and to also bring, particularly with our science policy fellowship, to provide scientists with the experience of being in a science policy related environment as well, and particularly very much focused on the Gulf region. So as you can imagine, most of our programs are based in the Gulf region. And as I'm describing the Science Policy Fellowship, you'll get to see a little bit more of how it is catered to help the region as well. So our Science Policy Fellowship is a one-year fellowship. What we do is we place our fellows in host offices across the Gulf region. We want the fellows to gain firsthand policymaking experience and work within the intersection of science and policy. So our host offices ranges from federal, state, local, and nonprofit agencies. And I have a slide that shares with you all the host office partnerships we have in the Gulf region. So we can definitely look into those as well. Just to give a real brief summary of our eligibility, I'll be going into it in more detail in a few slides. This fellowship is for recent master's graduates and PhD students or PhD graduates whose work is relevant to the mission and the goals of the Gulf Research Program. And we usually have a maximum of 10 fellows per cohort. So just to give you a little bit of an example of some of the different kinds of projects and skills that our science policy fellows have gained through the fellowship. These are just some examples. We definitely have seen more program management and evaluation work being done by the fellows. We have a couple of data-focused host offices as well now. So we are seeing more fellows doing more data and science policy related work as well. So just wanted to give you all a picture of some of the work that our fellows have done in the past. So in addition to first-hand experience in working with the host offices that is related to science policy, our fellows also receive an annual stipend. We just recently revised our stipend criteria. In addition to these stipends, the fellows will also receive what we call an annual health allowance, which of 5,500, which will be included in the monthly stipend package. So the idea for the annual health allowance is to offset the cost of health insurance and or to offset the cost of healthcare related needs during the fellowship. And in addition to that, we have a relocation payment that we provide in the beginning of the fellowship of 1,500. So in addition to the stipends and other related funding, we also have a professional development funds that we provide the fellows. So the professional development funds are for the fellows to use to gain a skill or gain a knowledge. And we have seen our fellows very creatively use the funds throughout the past couple of years. So an example of it would be going to a conference or presenting at a conference, which is a really wonderful experience for a lot of our fellows to have. Our fellows have done certifications such as recently the PMP Program Management Professional Certification is also and something we have seen our fellows do, or take GIS courses or different workshops. So anything that can help them build their skills or gain knowledge, we usually allow those expenses. The other really important and impactful feature of our fellowship is the mentoring aspect. So for each fellow, for each host office, we identify a mentor at the host office, and the fellow will receive guidance throughout the year from the mentor. So as you know, coming from academia and going into the host office, it's very useful to have a guiding hand that helps you with connecting the fellow to different departments, projects, helping them figure out how to build their network. And particularly at the end of the fellowship, they are also a key resource in identifying next steps for the fellow. So this is someone who will be a guiding person for the fellow throughout the year. In addition to that, we find that the fellows always have this organic mentoring relationship with many different colleagues within the host office as well. So it's definitely a very useful feature of the fellowship to have this person to rely on during the fellowship year and after as well. And in addition to that, the GRP, the Gulf Research Program Fellowship Office, also really helps with the mentoring aspect. So the fellow will have a check-in call with me every 2 months just to make sure everything is going well. If there are any challenges, we will be supporting them throughout the fellowship. In addition to that, another aspect of the fellowship is that the fellow will be taking part in monthly webinars. And the monthly webinars are not only for the professional development aspect of things, because we do cover things like how to find a job or build a resume or networking, important pieces of professional development skills, but at the same time, we also make sure that these spaces are where the fellows can connect with their cohort and build that relationship with one another, as networking, the next big feature of our fellowship, is an important part of it, of becoming more, going into the next stage of the career. Networking ends up being a very useful tool. So in addition to the mentor providing access to different networks of professionals through their host office, within the field of interest for the fellows and within the region, I feel like the fellowship cohort itself is a very good networking opportunity, because the fellows we have had years later are still in touch with their cohort peers. They are still supporting each other. So definitely it's a very unique networking and peer cohort relationship that's ongoing for years. So just to touch on the eligibility criteria, as mentioned before, in order to be eligible to apply to this fellowship, you'll need to be currently enrolled in a doctoral program or hold a master's level degree or a PhD. So for applicants who are not enrolled in a doctoral program and are in a master's level program, the eligible degrees must be completed by August 15, 2023, and conferred by December 31st of the year. And those who are currently enrolled in a doctoral program, we ask that they take a leave of absence for the duration of the fellowship. The reason why we do this is to make sure that the fellows have the full experience of the fellowship without worrying about the dissertation and the doctoral program. So if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer later on as well. And we have had many fellows who successfully have taken a leave of absence and gone back to their dissertation after. And to be eligible, the applicant will need to come from an area of research. It's a wide range of research areas that we accept applications from. The main thing is that the research will need to be relevant to the mission of the Gulf program, which is to develop, translate, and apply science, engineering, and medical knowledge to enhance offshore energy safety, environmental protection and stewardship, and human health and community resilience in the Gulf region. So it's pretty broad. We have had applications from very diverse many fields and have been successfully able to place them in host offices. It is open to US citizens only, and we are not be currently employed by US federal government. So these are our eligibility criteria for the fellowship. So this is the list of all of our host office partners we have had in the past years since 2015. As you can see, A lot of them are federal agencies, a lot of them are state-based agencies, and we also have many nonprofits that are part of the partnership. So every year we will be identifying host offices that are interested in having a fellow. So not all of these host offices will be part of our host office cohort this year. We will have around 15 or 16 host offices every year that will be interviewing with the fellows during the placement process. And I'll give you a little bit about the placement process in a bit as well. So as you can see, it's very widely spread out in the Gulf of Mexico states. And we have had very successful fellowship opportunities with them. One of the really interesting thing is that we also, I would say it's one of the very successful part of the fellowship that we have seen is that some of our fellows have ended up getting full-time employment with a lot of our host offices. It is definitely not guaranteed and depends on many variables, but we have had seen that happen. We have also have some of our past fellows now acting as mentors for some of our host offices. So definitely being able to create a nice network of fellows and alumni since 2015. So I wanted to just give a little bit of the key dates and share a little bit more about the placement process. So we are currently accepting applications, and I will pass on our website to Ellie so that she can share it with you. So our application deadline is March 1st. We will be reviewing applications and selecting finalists in March, April, and we interview our finalists and select our fellows in April. So another piece of it is May, June is our host office interviews and placements. So during this time, we have our fellows interview with our host officers. So it is up to the fellow to decide which host officers that they would like to interview with. And at the same time as the host officers are interviewing the fellows, we really stress that the fellows are interviewing the host officers as well. In addition to the projects and all that they're interested in, we encourage them to also make sure that it is a good fit. So once all the host officers interviews are done, we ask the fellows and the host officers to share with us their ranking, and we try our best to make a one-to-one match. It's not always the case. We also ask the host officers and the fellows to share descriptions of why they ranked each other where they did, so that we'll be able to get more context and be able to use that as well during the matching process. So all the applicants and the host officers will be notified of their placement in end of June, so that they will be able to know where they will be for the next year. And in early September, we have our fellowship orientation in DC. And then September 5th is when they will be reporting to their host offices. And the fellowship will go on until August 31st of 2024. So that's just a little bit about our fellowship. We have an online application system. I will share that link as well with you using chat. And I now will be passing it on to Dr. Hui Wu, who is our past fellow with us, just to share a little bit of his experience with the fellowship.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Maeesha. I just want to share a little bit about my experience with the NAIS Gulf Research Program Fellowship. I really enjoyed my time. I think I was a little special during my fellowship, where I actually got to do a 2-year fellowship instead of just 1 year. But I'm going to mainly focus my experience talking with my fellowship at the Gulf of Mexico division, the EPA Gulf of Mexico division. What I really enjoy about the NAS fellowship is that it allowed me to experience with a lot of various projects. So compared to your traditional job where you're hired on to do certain things, the fellowship allowed me to work on a variety of projects. Coming from a science background and going to the EPA Gulf of Mexico division, I was able to work on both science related projects as well as more partnership outreach and educational projects, which I learned that I really enjoyed. And so the fellowship really allowed me to expand my skills of going from more of a experimental ecologist to more of applied science. In addition, the fellowship allowed me to build my network. During my fellowship, I was able to work on a project that involved government agencies such as USGS, the EPA Office of Research and Development, as well as with the nonprofits such as the Pontchartrain Conservancy. I work with the Galveston Bay Foundation and also Keep Texas Beautiful. And also coming from a science background, I have experience writing grants, but this fellowship allowed me to see what's on the other side of the grant process. I've been involved in helping draft requests for application, as well as I've sat through many panels reviewing various application ranging from programs where EPA is funding, such as the trash-free water, where we're helping remove marine debris from our waterways, as well as changing people's behavior in terms of recycling and reducing single-use plastic, to brownfield-related projects. So that's what drew me to the fellowship. I think that is about it. I know it's really short. I'm more than happy to share more in detail with everybody. Maeesha, if you could share my email with everybody on the call, that'd be great.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about what you do now?
Yes. So like Maeesha said, it's not guaranteed, but you can definitely be hired on with your host office. So I did my fellowship. I didn't get hired on directly afterward. I actually did an extra year and a half or so as an ORISE fellowship. And then I was hired on with the Gulf of Mexico program. So I'm with the EPA. I'm currently with the EPA.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions at the end of the panel, we'll be happy to answer any. Passing on to you, Tracy.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that nice overview of the Gulf Policy Fellowship. I think that's something that, I've heard of before, but I didn't get as much exposure as a graduate student. So I thought this was a perfect audience for that kind of work. For our last set of program speakers today, we have two representatives from the American Geophysical Union, and they're going to go through some of the opportunities that are maybe a little less intensive than some of the fellowship programs that we have, but are still an opportunity to engage and be part of the science policy community. If you guys want to sort of introduce yourselves and take it away.
Will do. Thank you so much, Stacey. And thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate the invitation, all of your attention, and hopefully we'll get through some great opportunities that will be of value to all of you. I am Liz Landau, the Director of Science Policy and Government Relations here at AGU, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie Mangassarian, who is our Senior Specialist for Grassroots Engagement. All right, next slide, please. So we wanted to kick off with kind of a quick background on what AGU is for those who may not be familiar with us. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan scientific society. We publish dozens of scientific journals, and we also run the largest Earth and Space Science meeting, which pre-pandemic was about 28,000 people in person. We're expecting about 16,000 in person next week in Chicago at our meeting, with another maybe 2,000 attending virtually. So we really have focused on the intersection of science and society in addition to the science itself. And we run programs like the Thriving Earth Exchange, which helps connect communities that need help solving a problem with scientists who can solve it. And an Ethics and Equity Center, which focuses on ethics in science. And so we have a really strong science policy program as well, which Sophie and I are going to talk about today. And as you can see, I put our 3 main strategic goals up on this slide, so you can see what really motivates our organization. And in addition to advancing science, that focus is really there on benefiting humanity and the environment, which means we really need to work with communities and policymakers to implement positive change. Next slide, please. So within AGU, the programs we're going to talk about for all of you today are in our Science Policy and Government Relations Department, where Sophie and I work. We have these 2 major goals here, which are basically to help, it says AGU members, but it really is scientists in general. You don't have to be an AGU member paying dues to, be part of these programs that I'm going to talk about today, with maybe one exception. And we want all of our scientists to be able to actively engage in the policymaking process, to feel comfortable speaking with policymakers. And we want to ensure that those tools and resources are available, and that scientists feel comfortable doing so. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this brings me to our science policy programs. We have several at AGU, all of which are designed to give our community the skills, opportunities, and confidence to be a voice for science in policy. So Sophie and I are going to talk about all of these in detail. And you can also snap that QR code with your phone there if you want to get a link directly to a page that has information on all of these resources in more detail, links, all of that good stuff. And we'll drop that in the chat also. Okay, next slide, please. So Tacey had the great idea for Sophie and I to talk about our personal stories first and how we got into science policy, since we're in a position not dissimilar to your own now, for most of you who are watching right now. And so I'll share my story first, and then I'm going to pass it to Sophie and she'll share hers. So I started out in the sciences. I got my bachelor's and my master's in geological sciences. And when I was getting my master's, I really didn't have a clear idea of what the next step was for me. I just really enjoyed the science. I loved the joy of discovery. I liked learning about our world and what was happening and how things had gotten to be the way they were. And when I was in grad school, I was doing some really cool research on paleoceanography, but that basically meant I was looking through a microscope every single day, all day long. And that part of it was not so exciting for me. So I was trying to think about what are other opportunities? How can I use my knowledge and this love of science that I have and make a difference in a way that is not going to involve me being stuck in a lab every single day? Because for me personally, that wasn't what I wanted. And so I was fortunate enough to take a course on geoscience education, which also talked a little bit about public understanding of science and communicating science and working with policymakers and engaging them in scientific issues. So that was really eye-opening for me. I was also getting involved in some policy issues that were not necessarily related to the sciences, but I was, getting out there and being part of protests and other things that were happening that made me a little more savvy about how to work with policymakers, how to affect change in policy and that sort of thing. And then the last thing that happened that helped me towards my path is that I had a colleague in grad school with me who heard about science policy internship. Now, the specific ones that they learned about and which I wound up applying for was through the American Geosciences Institute. But now I'm really proud to say that AGU also offers science policy internships, which I'll talk about later. And so I applied for one of these internships thinking I'd try out this science policy field and give it a shot. I was fortunate enough to be accepted. And so after I finished my master's, I did a 3-month internship in Washington, D.C. For me, this was an incredible experience. I learned so much, and I really found that I enjoyed this work and it was something that I wanted to do. So from there, fortunately, because of the internship, I had doors open for me and I was offered positions to work in science policy. And I wound up accepting an entry-level position at AGU. And then 15 years later, here I am, the director of science policy in the program. So I think internships are a fantastic way to step into science policy. And I think being engaged in science policy while you are in school is also really helpful. So that's my science policy journey. And now I'll hand it over to Sophie to share hers.
Thanks, Liz. So my science policy journey also started off in the sciences. In undergrad, I was really interested in environmental microbiology. But from the get-go, I knew I was less interested in a research-focused career and wanted to pursue how that research was being used to advocate for better environmental protections. But I really wasn't sure where to go from there. I didn't even consider policy as an available option to me. But after graduation, I was doing some citizen science volunteering for a local nonprofit and saw how they were tying their research to local action. And at the same time, I was also working at AGU for another department and was really inspired by the science policy team, bridging that research and policy on the federal level, and wanted to pivot to policy. So I pursued a master's in environmental policy from the University of Colorado Boulder. And after graduation, I was offered a position under my professor on a Colorado state level science policy grassroots network. And there I was connecting rank and file scientists in the state to their policymakers and have been really interested in doing that since then. So I've been working on local, state, and federal climate and science policy advocacy and grassroots outreach. And my favorite part of my job is, like I said, connecting people to those policy resources, opportunities, and training, making it more accessible than it felt to me when I was first starting out and getting interested in policy. So if science policy is something that you are interested in exploring or having as a career, or even as an avenue to get your research to a wider audience, then we have a lot of different opportunities at AGU to help you achieve those goals. And that brings me to the first program that we're going to talk about, which is the Voices for Science program, which works to support, reward, and foster a network of science communication and policy advocates to amplify the voice of science and build valuable dialogues and relationships with key audiences. So whether that's the media, the public, other students, policymakers, it's really self-directed based on the goals that you want to achieve around your research and your experiences. And this is a year-long program where you choose whether you want to apply to the science communication or the science policy track. And if you're unsure which track that you're interested in, we can always talk to you about the best fit for that. But our advocates, or who we call Avengers, meet monthly in regional teams with an AGU staff member to work through monthly goals. And these calls are seriously part of one of the coolest parts of my I have one job, which is hearing all their achievements and progress that they're making. So to give you an example of a current policy track project, I wanted to share one of our advocates' experience, Lizzie, who you can see on the bottom of the screen there. Lizzie has a degree in biology and a master's in marine biology from the University of Hawaii. And she's been working closely with agencies, scientists, and policymakers to help prevent and plan for the introduction of stony coral tissue loss disease in Hawaii. So after hosting a workshop on it, she gained a lot of interest, and someone reached out to her about putting together an emergency rule to help prevent the introduction of the disease, and has since presented on this emergency rule and gained a lot of attention from state representatives who were at the meeting, vessel companies, and the Coast Guard. And this is just one example of a project. There's many, and our host, Tacey, is also one of our Avengers. And aside from these monthly calls, you have access to the community of scientists who are all interested in science policy and communications. So people who have similar goals than you, starting out at the same point as you, or similar interests, you can all find them in this network of scientists. And we offer cross-track trainings and orientation in DC to meet with your cohort, micro grants to help you work towards your goals, and travel stipends to fall meeting, our annual meeting that AGU hosts. And if you're interested, we're currently recruiting applicants for the 2023 to 2024 track or term. And I will drop, well, that will be sent out in the email after this webinar. Great, thank you for dropping that in the chat. And so while our Voices for Science is very self-directed and focused on SciComm and SciPolicy skills, the next program I'm going to talk about is Team-Based Organizing, which is geared towards scientists looking to learn key community organizing skills. This program was started by the Union of Concerned Scientists, and we have recently partnered with them to reach an even larger cohort of scientists interested in advocacy movement building. So interested applicants apply as a team leader in an already formed group, like a student group, looking to increase their impact, or you can apply as an individual who wants to gain the skills to start your own group towards a common goal. And in this program, we also offer those monthly coaching calls, training, both through an annual virtual summit and virtual fall workshop series based around organizing and campaigning. And one example of a TBO project is the Virginia Scientist Community Interface, and you'll see their flyer on the slide here. And they're a science policy and advocacy group for early career scientists, and they provide expertise for local and regional advocacy issues. And this group decided that they want to link arms with the local fight in their state against a proposed pipeline to help stop the project polluting the state's communities. So working together, they use their scientific expertise to review permits for the project and found that it would cause more harmful erosion and water quality impacts than originally thought. And their work was actually cited in the court's decision to revoke the permits. And so they've been making a lot of headway there in their community. And this program can introduce you to a network of community of scientists that are really interested in that organizing. So both across the country, meeting other teams, or in your community when you do look for other like-minded peers that you want to take action with. So we are also recruiting for this program. Our fall applications close December 31st. And the only requirement is you must be Science Network eligible or an AGU member to apply as a team leader. But if you find another team leader, you can join their team without needing to be part of that eligibility if you're interested. And switching gears a little bit to our next program, which is AGU's newest science policy outreach program, the Local Science Partners, which is more federally focused than the two other programs that I spoke about. So it differs in that it provides a more structured avenue for AGU scientists to get involved in science policy by basically being an extension of our science policy team. Each partner works to build long-lasting relationships with their federal policymakers and are given monthly policy action items to advocate for, and they incorporate their own research, their expertise, and their own stories as constituents to build trust with their policymakers and increase and diversify science's congressional champions and make sure that science is on the forefront of their legislators' priorities. And even though this program is only coming up on its 1-year anniversary, our partners have been making a lot of progress, both on their relationship building front, but also personally. So we've gotten co-sponsors to climate bills after our workshops that we've held with our partners and after they sent their monthly action items to their legislators. And our partners have reported that they feel that that they're building the confidence and knowledge to understand the federal science policy landscape and advocate to policymakers on both sides of the aisle. So the training for this program really incorporates science communication, advocacy, and policy skills to become policy insiders. In June, we bring our partners to DC for a workshop and congressional visits day. We host regional calls a few times a year so partners can collaborate with others in their state, and we encourage district visits and town halls on top of those monthly action calls that I mentioned. And there's no term limits for this program, and applications open in October each year. So we'll share some opportunities where you can follow us so you can learn when that application opens. And now I will hand it back to Liz to talk about AGU's fellowship and internship programs.
Great, thanks so much, Sophie. And I do want to note that all of the programs we've talked about so far are ones you can do while you're in school or while you're working. They're things that only take a few hours a month. So they're a great way to gain experience and get involved in science policy before doing something more involved like a fellowship or just to gain skills so you can make a difference in the world using your science without leaving the field or stopping your research. So next, I'm going to talk about a couple of full-time programs. We'll switch gears a little bit. So this first one I'm talking about is the AGU Congressional Science Fellowship. So this is part of the Congressional Science Fellowship program that is run by the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS. AGU is one of a number of organizations that sponsors a Congressional Science Fellow. So this is a fantastic program if you really want to get involved in science policy, and has a lot of similarities to some of the other fellowship programs that we heard about today. This program, while it's part of AAAS, is sponsored, selected, and supported by AGU as an organization. And you work in Congress, you work for either a member of Congress's office or for a committee for 1 full year as a full-time staff person. So it's an incredible experience. You really get to contribute to science policy as part of this at the federal level. There's a stipend of $72,000 for this, plus healthcare coverage, relocation expenses, travel expenses for work, and to attend the AGU annual meeting. And there's a really incredible network that opens doors for you as part of this. It's truly a unique and valuable experience if science policy is really what you want to do. To be eligible, AGU doesn't require a PhD, but to be a competitive candidate, we recommend a PhD or either a master's degree and 3 years of experience to be eligible for this particular program. There's a lot more detail on the website as well if you check that out in terms of applications. Right now, the application is open until January 15th of 2023. So you can certainly apply at this time. And what fellows have gone on to do is always really impressive as well. One of our recent fellows was working for then Senator Kamala Harris and became a trusted member of her staff. And when she became the Vice President of the United States, he actually stayed on her staff and is now one of her climate advisors in her current position. So that's a pretty incredible opportunity. We have a lot of fellows who do stay in policy, and many of them are still working either in offices on Capitol Hill, within Congress, or for committees. Some of them are working for organizations like AGU or other, nonprofits. And some of them go back to research in academia, and they just want to have that knowledge and take that with them, perhaps use that in part of their teaching or research going forward. So a great experience regardless of which direction you wind up taking in your career. Next slide, please. So one of the opportunities that's dear to my heart, as you heard from my earlier talk, is the science policy internships. So this is, I think, often overlooked as an opportunity. People hear a lot about the science policy fellowships and how prestigious they are, and don't really consider this. But I think it's such a great gateway into a career path, or even just to gain that experience if you want to try it out. I really recommend it to anyone who's looking at getting into this field. And for our internship in particular, you'll be embedded with the AGU science policy staff. Currently, we are doing virtual internships, but if you're local, you can certainly be part of that experience as well. These positions last 3 months, so it's a really great period of time for you to be able to get your feet under you and understand what's happening in the science policy world, and then figure out if it's the right fit for you. In terms of the value, you really get to learn from science policy professionals in the field. It's great for networking and getting to know people, not just in that organization, but all of those partner organizations that they work with in coalitions so frequently. And also getting to know people on, the Capitol Hill and other policymakers. And, in order to be eligible, we take people who are still students, we take people who are recent graduates. Eligibility is quite flexible. Applications are generally rolling, and we have application periods throughout the year. They are not fixed, but we do have them coming up frequently. So we have them posted on the AGU website for our jobs, jobs.agu.org. Or I'm going to share some information later about signing up for a couple of our newsletters. That's a great way to hear about them when they're open. And you can also follow us on Twitter, and I'll be sharing that handle later as well. So with that, we want to transition a little bit. If you'll go to that next slide, please, and give you an idea of the full range of things that you can do to be involved in science policy. So it doesn't have to just be a fellowship, internship, or long-term commitment, one of those programs that lasts a year, even if it's part-time. Although obviously we have lots of programs to meet those needs too. So let's go through some of the things that you can do quickly or easily. So next slide, please. So we're going to start with some of those faster, easier options, and then we'll build from there. Social media engagement is a really easy way to get started in policy. Almost all policymakers are on social media, and they watch it pretty closely because it really gives them an ear to the ground of what their constituents are saying. If they're not doing it themselves, the member of Congress or other policymaker you're interested in, they have a staff person who's watching it closely for them. And it's also an easy way for them to share their accomplishments and stay connected. So I would say follow policymakers to see what they're posting, engage with them, tag them in posts to get their attention, keep it short, keep it focused. And there's a lot of power in numbers. So if you can get your friends involved, if you have a particular policy issue that you're trying to push or encourage, that's a great way to get some attention. And if you'll click that slide one time, there is our Twitter handle if you'd like to follow us at AGU Sci Policy. It's a great way to keep up on science policy happening. Okay, next slide, please. So there's a lot of other online engagement you can do, things that are pretty quick and easy as well. You can sign on to petitions and letters. Organizations like AGU are frequently putting out opportunities like this that are very easy. We have these websites set up where really with just a few clicks, you can send a letter out to your policymakers via email to let them know when there are important science policy issues, what you think that they should do, or just to share your information and your resources with them. You can also call policymakers. That's a very common thing. I know a lot of people aren't huge on phone calls. So, if that's not your thing, we do have letters and it's quite easy. But, they do appreciate those phone calls and they're used to getting them. So they're a pretty low-key way to get involved as well. All of this can be done virtually. And we have a lot of toolkits too to help make it easy for you and tell you kind of what you should say when you're doing any of this outreach. There are lots of other organizations who do this as well. So, if you have one that's near and dear to your heart, you can use their tips as well. I mean, the key goal for all of this is really to develop relationships over time with policymakers so they know of you. But this is a great way to kind of get that started or keep a relationship going. Next slide, please. So taking it to the next level, maybe a little more time and attention needed. Election engagement. This is not just the presidential election every 4 years. There are important elections that are happening all the time, just like we had last month. I know at this point, those of you, a lot of you may be feeling like, okay, it's a little too soon to be talking about elections again, but just think about how important it has been and how important it is that people got out there and voted. So, you can do things like encourage your friends and colleagues and other students to vote. There is a pretty low STEM student voting rate, surprisingly. In the 2018 election, only 34% of eligible STEM students actually voted. So that was the lowest of any field in that study that they did to measure it. It has gone up somewhat since then. The 2020 election was higher, but we have a lot of room to improve still. So you can do things like attend a town hall virtually, vote for science, encourage other people to vote, be part of a Get Out the Vote campaign, lots of ways you get involved there. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sophie for a couple more opportunities.
Great, thank you, Liz. Some other options that take a little more time than a couple of minutes include getting engaged with a campus science policy group. You can either join a group or start a campus group. The National Science Policy Network is one of those options, or your campus might have a science policy center that you can get involved in. That's how I got involved on my campus when I was in my master's program. And another option is arranging science policy events on campus, or you can even do this virtually to get more participation from across the country or from other people who can't always be on campus. So that could be a department seminar, or you can host a panel with local policymakers on campus. You can also join a broader activism group and use the lessons learned to help encourage science policy work. And you can also join a mentoring program to help find mentors who have been in your shoes and can help you navigate your science policy journey. So this can really help cut that learning curve down. If you're just getting started, you can really learn from their experiences. And these can be one-off conversations or multi-year relationships that you can form with your mentors. And there's a lot of mentoring programs available, but I put the QR code for one that AGU helps to host, which is a multi-society program, the Mentoring 365 program. And there you can find people who are mentors looking for mentees and really get engaged that way. You can also check out some opportunities that your scientific and professional societies are offering. They provide a lot of opportunities that you may not even know about. So signing up for these congressional visits days that are either virtual or they can be in person in Washington, D.C. You can serve on a position statement panel or make comments on policy position statements. You can also sign up to be a rapid response expert, which is just offering to be a scientist on call for one-off policy or science needs. And you can join their networks and communities. So a lot of scientific networks and professional societies have forums, Slack channels. I know that we have AGU Connect and Sharing Science Network at AGU. So those are other options to get more focus and more involved. And writing op-eds and letters to the editor are also a great way to get to your policymakers and to your community and help them learn about an issue. So your legislators' offices are very much invested in their local papers, and they keep up with constituent issues through these local papers, and they review their local publications for mentions of themselves. So you can really find the right outlet based on your policymaker that you want to reach and get their attention by mentioning them by name. To get started on this, you can reach out to your campus's public relations, or groups like AGU and AAAS's SciLine can also help you prepare. We have lots of toolkits and recorded webinars that you can watch to get started. And level 3 is just going all in from a few months to a year or more in those science policy opportunities and fellowships and internships that were mentioned throughout this entire webinar from other presenters as well. And I know the options and opportunities can be hard to keep track of sometimes when you've got a million things going on. So sign up to stay connected with us by texting AGU to the number on the screen to receive action alerts. We also have a QR code there to sign up for monthly science policy updates from our team. And we shared our Twitter handle, and that link in the chat, you can find all of our applications page and more information. And we're also available through email if you want to learn more, if you want to set up a time to talk about opportunities or speak more in depth about the levels of engagement that we shared, and also help point you to a program that you think might be the right fit. So thank you again. I know we're coming up on time, so thank you again for having us, and we hope that we have the opportunity to work with some of you in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that presentation and the wide breadth of opportunities that we've sort of encompassed with all of these groups. I don't see any questions in the chat, just a thank you note in the Q&A over there. So it looks like we don't necessarily have any questions, and I feel like you guys covered all things like deadlines and programs and information. If there's anybody that has a last minute question and wants to type it out really quickly, or raise your hand and we can unmute you. Both of those are potential options, but otherwise we might just end a little bit early today, unless anybody here has any sort of last minute comments they'd like to add or information. I guess it's probably a no.
Casey, I wanted to say something just with the wonderful overview that everyone's provided. I learned as the Texas Sea Grant Research Coordinator that I recognized Hui who was one of our speakers, and he had previously applied to the Canals Fellowship Program a couple years back, and he has successfully now been a fellow at the Gulf Research Program. So applying to one gives you that great experience to be able to apply to another and be successful. So keep applying.
Yes,
Thank
and
you for hosting this.
I also did apply twice for anybody.
Yes, yes.
So it is up, you know, it's not a one and done kind of thing. And these opportunities are all fantastic in their own way. And all
It's a learning experience, just putting a package together. So yeah, thank you.
definitely worth applying. And I haven't seen any questions come in, so it looks like we are probably good to go. But I wanted to thank everybody for coming. This is our last webinar, so thank you to everybody as well for attending for all of these webinars that we've been doing. And all of these wonderful people here are great resources. If you do have any questions, their information is on our Facebook page, as well as here likely in some of these chats you've been getting, and we'll send out those documents as well that have been forwarded to us with the recording for this lecture. So with that, I would just like to say thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and looking forward to seeing at least some of you at AGU next week as well.